Craigslist is the ugliest website on the internet, and they haven't changed their website for 25 years. And during that time, lots of people have tried to take their lunch money. Lots of companies trying to take pieces of what Craigslist does and compete with them. Despite all that, Craigslist has made billions of dollars in profit. And why? Because of their strategy and a specific pattern in their strategy. A pattern that other successful companies have also used, and I'm going to show you how to use the same pattern in your strategy to win in the market and be uncopyable. So let's go. So yeah, Craigslist looks like this, and I guess if we're being generous, we could say that it's minimal. Yeah, minimal and hideous. And yes, it's been this way since 1999, which tells us it's not just minimal, it's stagnant. It hasn't changed. This doesn't feel like a great strategy for a consumer website, so let's see what the CEO has to say. He says creating a superior user experience is more important than making money. And this is an amazing statement for two reasons. One is that anything could be more important than making money. That's pretty cool. And also, he thinks this is a superior user experience. Okay, well, lots of people disagree, and have for a long time, because it's ugly and needs a redesign. Some people say that because of the bad design, other players will win, because they'll be like Craigslist but better. And this is what a Harvard Business School case study said too, that the obstacle to sustainability and growth at Craigslist is that they value the customer offering over monetization. And yeah, that's what the CEO said, valuing customers over monetization, that's true. That's the obstacle, says Harvard. And also because they trust consistency over innovation. And yeah, that's what they do. They are very, very consistent. I guess that's the nicer way of saying stagnant. So yeah, so they go on to say that Craigslist is going to be overtaken by new entrants who copy the same concept but improve the user experience. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, question, is that what happened? And yeah, a ton of companies tried to do exactly this, copy the idea, but with a better user experience in some niche. Now, a lot of these companies died, but that's okay, startups die. That in itself doesn't prove anything. In fact, some of them were very, very successful. Almost all the companies here are multi-billion-dollar success stories, so that's pretty good, including OfferUp, who was in the original HBR case study. So yeah, people did take pieces of Craigslist and make a ton of money on it. So did they defeat Craigslist? Like, how's Craigslist doing? And the answer is Craigslist did $750 million of revenue in 2024 with 50 employees. Incredibly successful and efficient, and even more so when you consider profit, where they are 10 to 20 times more profitable per employee than these really impressive, huge, successful tech companies. But yeah, Craigslist is doing really, really well, despite people calling for their demise 10 years ago, and the very real truth that their UX is minimal and bad, and it's stagnant. So we have to explain this. Why are they so successful despite all this? Now here's my theory. Yes, it's minimal, yes, it's stagnant, but what that means is anyone can use this, including people who are not very good at the internet. In fact, Craig Newmark, as in Craigslist Craig, Craig says that part of his purpose for Craigslist was to help people get onto the internet in the first place. And so something that was really simple and straightforward helps that to happen, even if you're not technical, and most people are not technical. And then the website is very fast because there's no images or anything. That also helps people get on board because if you have a slow internet connection and a slow device, Craigslist still works really well. So if lots and lots of people everywhere can use it, then there'll be a big selection on the website, which there is. And as we all know, big selection is really important for marketplaces. So this is another big advantage that they have. And then finally, they're so profitable because it's so low cost to run this website. Again, there's no images, so the servers are really cheap. It's easy for the engineers to maintain it. Tech support is easy. They even support 14 languages, which is also not too hard when the product is so simple and doesn't change over time. So what we see here is that these weaknesses enable special strengths that other sites don't have. This goes beyond the usual thing that says strengths always come with weaknesses. Everything's a trade-off. Yeah, that's not insightful. This is more than that. This is that weaknesses enable special strengths that otherwise wouldn't be possible. And this is what gives them a unique and very durable strategy. Now, I want to show you that this is a pattern. So let's move to a completely different industry and consider Southwest Airlines, who calls themselves the low-fare airline. And in fact, their fares are very low, so that's fair. And this is kind of a crazy industry to decide to have low fares in, because airplanes are expensive, maintenance is expensive, renting airports is expensive, fuel and gas and people, everything's expensive. And so on top of that, having low fares is going to make it very hard for them to be profitable. And yet, Southwest Airlines is by far the most profitable airline and has remained consistently profitable over time, unlike any other US airline. In fact, even in this dip here during COVID, they dipped the least of all the airlines and they recovered the fastest. Also, every single airline in the entire history of the US has gone bankrupt. Every one except Southwest. So they're consistently profitable, they don't go bankrupt. Actually, it's a fantastic business model, and so they must have a great strategy. What is that strategy? Well, here's a series of interlocking decisions that makes up the strategy for Southwest Airlines. And if we look at it, we start to see some clear weaknesses, like they don't serve meals, they don't support travel agents. Now you might say, who cares about travel agents? But many businesses only use travel agents to make sure that they get the right prices and so that the expenses goes right into the expense system. What that means is this is a big weakness for business travelers. And just to give you an idea of how big of a weakness this is, American Airlines, one of their competitors, does multiple billions in revenue just from travel agents. So this is a big weakness, in fact. And they have limited passenger service in general, meaning they only make these little point-to-point hops. They don't do any long hauls, they don't do international. And so you can't go to a lot of cities you might want to go to, and they go to secondary airports and they don't support connections with other airlines that go to the primary airports, and they won't transfer your bags. In other words, they don't make it easy for you to even combine them with another airline that doesn't have these limitations. But these weaknesses create specific strengths. For example, because they have only these short-to-short hauls and they don't have a whole variety of routes, they can standardize on a single type of aircraft. That means they get bulk discounts from Boeing, for real. But more importantly, their maintenance costs are low because their engineers only have to know one kind of aircraft and have one set of tools and have one set of spare parts. And then they learn the aircraft really well because they only do the one thing, which means they're really good at quickly diagnosing and fixing things. Now, another thing they do is they pay their employees a lot and they give them stock. Now, you might say, that doesn't sound like a weakness, that's a strength. Well, if we're thinking strictly of the business model and trying to be profitable, we might say that this is a weakness in the business model. But because they pay employees really well and they have a great culture, they have lean, highly productive ground crews, and because they have great people and the simple maintenance, they have frequent, reliable departures. And that is something that consumers absolutely like. That's a huge advantage. And then on the business model side, they have high aircraft utilization because they do so many routes reliably. And that makes them very profitable, which allows them to have very low ticket prices. So you can see here how the weaknesses have created strengths that other airlines have not matched. And it creates a business model that also other airlines have not matched. Now, this particular diagram, not with my drawings, but just the diagram, came from an article in Harvard Business Review in 1996 by Michael Porter. That's the same Michael Porter who invented the 5 forces. And he gave examples of other strategies too. His point is that a good strategy is a network of decisions that reinforce each other, and then that creates coherence inside the company, and it means that these decisions pile on and add on each other rather than being at odds. I would say the same thing is true of Craigslist, and then I've added this extra insight that not only are there so-called weaknesses, but that those weaknesses are necessary to create special strengths. Now, another special thing these companies have in common is that they're still growing, strong, and profitable 30 years after Michael Porter published their strategy in HBR. Now, these are all competitive environments. These are all commoditized markets. We saw how bad the competition was with Craigslist. So how is it that despite a strategy that's not a secret, and 30 years of time for both incumbents and new entrants to copy them or compete with them, how come these strategies are so robust to that over so much time? In other words, why weren't they copied? So I have a theory of that as well, and here's what it is. Think about the conversations you have when you see a competitor who does something really great. Oh man, they came out with this new feature I really like, or oh, this new pricing structure they have is great. What you're doing is you're focusing on their strengths, some kind of positive thing, and saying, man, maybe we need to do that. And if I'm an airline, I should do that. I should say, hey, maybe we should not have as many kinds of aircraft. It'll make maintenance easier. Maybe we should do things to increase aircraft utilization. And yeah, that would be smart. Even doing that incrementally would make the business better. So sure, yeah. But here's what they don't say. Hey, let's pay all our employees 30% more. That a good idea? Let's give them all stock. Is that cool? Hey, let's stop using travel agents. Like, we'll just stop having billions in revenue from that. Yeah. And let's change which airports we go to and just do short hops and just go to secondary airports and so on and so forth. That's the conversation you never have. You're not going to copy weaknesses, only strengths. But as I've said multiple times now, the weaknesses created unique strengths. So if you're not willing to copy that too, you are not going to win on those strengths. You may not even be able to do them at all. And so to me, the weaknesses also make the strategy uncopyable because competitors do not copy weaknesses. Now, I've cheated a little bit because when we say strengths and weaknesses, you have to ask, well, who's deciding what a strength and a weakness is? I mean, high aircraft utilization, that's clearly a strength because it makes our costs better. Having cheaper maintenance certainly makes our costs better. That's strictly good. But what about this set of stuff that's about how the customer feels? Will all customers see strengths and weaknesses the same way? Well, no. So we have to be a little more nuanced here. Like, what if we consider the business traveler? Now, I already said business travelers use travel agents. So this isn't just a weakness of Southwest. This is a deal breaker. They may not be able to travel on Southwest at all. And this stuff about point-to-point hops, I mean, I need to get to where I'm going. I can't be hopping around the country. That's pretty bad. And you're not letting me connect and all this other stuff. In other words, these things are not just weaknesses. They're deal breakers. So this is much worse for the business traveler. But conversely, let's take a casual traveler, like a 20-something who's going to Vegas for the weekend. So they're going to love the low ticket prices. Of course, I suppose everybody loves that. But they don't care about the travel agents. I mean, it's not green. They're not happy that they can't use a travel agent. They just don't care. And they don't care if they're not going to get a meal for a 2-hour flight. And they don't care which airport they have to drive to, or they don't care about connecting with other airlines. I mean, all this stuff that otherwise would be a negative is in fact a don't care. And just like we said earlier, oh, the fact that you pay your employees well and give them stock, that's a positive. That's not a negative. I'm happy about that. That is a green if I'm a consumer. I like supporting companies like that. And when you look at this diagram, there's no red. There are no weaknesses. It's perfect. And so that just shows you that there's these customer segments ranging, of course, from the perfect customer who thinks you don't have weaknesses, because for them you don't, and the other end where your weaknesses are deal breakers. And then there's people in the middle for whom you are a trade-off and they have to make a decision. So maybe a family traveling with kids during the summer. Of course, the low fares are great and they don't care about travel agents either. But making multiple hops across the country sounds pretty bad to do with a bunch of kids. So that might be a negative. In other words, they're going to weigh the strengths and weaknesses and they're going to make a decision. Sometimes they'll pick you. So we have names for these things. The perfect customer is the ideal customer profile, or ICP, as you'll see that online. The person who doesn't think you have any weaknesses at all. And then this is the addressable market, which ranges from that perfect customer to people who say, I can see both sides and sometimes I will pick you as a trade-off. And then you have the people who are not in your target market at all. Now I want to give you 2 tips for what to do with this that are not obvious and a lot of people get wrong. First of all, for the ICP, you have to focus on them. And by focus, I mean everything: marketing, sales, the website, product development, features, everything for the ideal customer and not for the whole addressable market. Why? Because if the ideal customer comes to your website, they need to immediately see, oh my gosh, this is perfect for me. If they can't, you're clearly not doing your job. If the perfect customer doesn't know that you're the perfect product, you are doing a terrible job explaining your product. You need to win all of those customers, that whole niche. And then here's the thing about the addressable market. You might think that you're going to miss them, but you don't. Because remember, they're making a trade-off. They need to know what your strengths are so they know what they're trading off. And when you make that very clear and they know what they're deciding between, you actually sign up more of the addressable market, in fact. So this is how to maximize customers. Now, for the people who are out of scope, you need to ignore them. You need to ignore things like their feature requests. Now, this sounds easy, but it's actually hard because they're going to sign up as customers anyway. Why? Well, maybe they didn't realize this wasn't the right product for them, or they just were really hoping it was going to work, or especially in a business context, somebody else bought the product and made them use it, so they are begrudgingly using the product as a out-of-scope customer. But the trick is they're still in tech support, complaining about things, asking for features, wanting you to integrate with something, talking about bugs, wanting you to change the user experience. And they're even going outside and leaving reviews about you. So it's really tempting to do something about that. You want to take all those things, put it in the product management system and prioritize them, but you must not. You have to know who is my out-of-scope customer, who's addressable, so that you don't listen to the out-of-scope feature requests and bug reports and confusions. They will drag you to a place that's not your strategy. And so we have the full story of how to win with intentional weakness. Your strategy is made of interlocking decisions, but your unique special strengths are made by picking weaknesses that create unique strengths. And because people won't copy the weaknesses, it makes your whole strategy uncopyable. And at the same time, it creates clear target markets so you know who wants this set of trade-offs and who doesn't. So yes, Craigslist is the ugliest website on the internet, but their weaknesses enable them to make billions in profit and last for 30 years. What intentional weaknesses are you going to put in your strategy to create unique and uncopyable strengths?